A billionaire's dark secret. What she found behind the walls. The chilling echo of a gunshot ripped through the pre-dawn silence, not from the grand Gothic estate where Alara O'Connell now worked, but from a memory she couldn't shake. Just hours earlier, she'd arrived at Blackwood Manor, a sprawling edifice shrouded in perpetual twilight, expecting nothing more than a new culinary position. A simple job, a chance to escape her past. But as the iron gates clanged shut behind her, sealing her within its ancient whispering walls, Alara realized this was no ordinary opportunity. There were eyes watching, silences that screamed secrets, and a powerful, reclusive man, Adrian Thorne, accustomed to controlling everything. Except, perhaps, his own haunted heart. She came with a worn suitcase and a chef's whites, but that very night, she would stumble upon something that would change her life, and his, forever. Are you ready for the truth? The winding, overgrown drive twisted like a serpent up a lonely hill, a path few dared or were privileged enough to tread. At its summit, cloaked by ancient gnarled oaks and an unnerving quiet, stood Blackwood Manor. It was majestic, untouched, and terrifyingly perfect. Alara, her small wheeled suitcase bumping behind her and a crumpled resume clutched in sweaty hands, took a deep, shaky breath before the imposing iron gate. She wasn't entirely sure what to expect. All she knew was that this cook's position paid more than any restaurant she'd ever graced, and there was one peculiar detail. The interview would be conducted personally by the owner himself. Adrian Thorne, a recluse of mysterious repute, rarely seen in public. With a metallic groan, the gate swung open, revealing a silent, expressionless man in a stark black uniform. "This way, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Thorne awaits." Alara swallowed hard. This felt less like an interview and more like a scene from a chilling classic. The sun had already dipped below the distant peaks when she was led through the manor's endless corridors. Plush crimson carpets muffled her footsteps. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft golden glow, dancing across the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of aged leather, rich mahogany, and something else. Something distinctly masculine, alluringly warm. Entering the vast library, a grand hall with floor-to-ceiling windows and towering shelves packed with ancient tomes, she heard it. Adrian Thorne. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his tie conspicuously absent, the top button of his shirt undone, as if formality dared not fully embrace him. His eyes, a shade of amber that bordered on gold, assessed her with unnerving intensity. It wasn't arrogance. It was a profound, quiet curiosity, as if he were silently dissecting her very essence. Alara O'Connell. His voice was deep, controlled, precise. "This is unusual." She attempted a smile, but her lips wavered. I just," she stammered, desperate not to make a bad impression. He gestured for her to sit. No secretary. No intimidating interview desk. Just two armchairs facing each other, a crackling fireplace, and the muffled whisper of the wind outside. "Do you enjoy cooking?" he asked, his question surprisingly simple. She blinked, taken aback. "I love it. It's the only thing that makes me forget time." "Good. Here, time doesn't matter much." He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "What's the one ingredient a perfect dish can't do without?" Alara paused, considering. Then she answered with raw sincerity. "Feeling. Without it, it's just food." A faint smile touched Adrian's lips, a corner twitching almost imperceptibly. But in his eyes, there was something more, a flicker, a contained fire. "An interesting answer," he murmured, rising. "Most people say spices or technique." "Well, I have both," she retorted, a flash of unintentional boldness surprising even herself. Dick turned slowly, approaching her until he stood just a few steps away, close enough for her to catch the subtle, woody fragrance of his cologne. It was commanding. "You start tomorrow, Alara." She blinked. "Just like that? No trial?" "No. I've seen what I needed to see." He turned his back. "Oh, and one last thing." She watched him, waiting. Adrian looked over his shoulder, his gaze so piercing it made her forget how to breathe. In this house, nothing is quite as it seems. Then, he vanished down the corridor, an elegant shadow swallowed by the encroaching night. Alara was left alone, her heart pounding. She didn't know if she'd just landed the best job of her life, or if she'd walked into a perilous game with invisible rules. And it had all begun at dusk. The next morning dawned cloaked in a fine mist, as if the manor itself preferred to hide its secrets under a gray veil. Alara awoke in a spacious room, adorned with antique furniture and smelling of fresh lavender. The heavy curtains barely let in the light, as if even the sun needed permission to enter here. She rose, put on the cook's uniform that hung on the door, and descended to explore her new domain, the kitchen of Blackwood Manor. It was a culinary paradise, white marble countertops, shelves brimming with exotic spices, state-of-the-art ovens, and chef's tools she'd only ever seen in magazines. But there was a curious quiet in the air. No other cooks, no assistants, just her. On the refrigerator, a handwritten list in a firm script. Prepare. Light breakfast, eggs, fresh juice, croissants. No refined sugar. Serve nothing too hot. The signature at the bottom, or Thornall's. She frowned. He was demanding, meticulous, and observant. Alara prepared of everything with the care of someone who knew they were being judged, even when no one seemed to be watching. Minutes after she finished, he appeared. Adrian Thorne entered the kitchen silently, wearing a gray sweater and dark trousers. His hair was damp, as if he'd just come from a shower. Without a word, he approached the counter, his eyes examining each dish before touching anything. "You did well with what I asked," he stated after a sip of orange juice. "Do you know how to listen?" Alara turned, trying to hide the shiver down her spine. "I prefer listening to guessing, Mr. Thorne." He raised an eyebrow. "Here, no one calls me Mert." "Then, Adrian," she ventured. Her voice a little shaky. He didn't reply, only offered a slight smile and continued eating in silence. For the rest of the day, Alara didn't see him again, but she felt his presence. The mansion was too vast for just 2 inhabitants, yet she had the constant sensation of being watched, not maliciously, but with interest, as if he were studying her movements without wanting to be noticed. Late that afternoon, while organizing the pantry, she found an old notebook hidden behind a box of imported olive oils. It was leather-bound, and in the bottom corner was an inscription, A.M. Curious, she opened it to the first page, but the sound of footsteps in the corridor made her snap it shut immediately. Adrian appeared, suddenly, standing in the kitchen doorway, his brow slightly furrowed. "Any problems?" "No, just organizing," she lied, hiding the notebook to her side. He approached slowly, his eyes fixed on her. "This house has its rules, Alara. Some things are best left where they are." She flinched, feeling the weight of his words. "I understand." Adrian stared at the notebook for a moment, but said nothing more. He simply walked away, and before exiting, murmured, "Tomorrow night I need some special dinner." "For 2 people?" Alara tried to hide her disappointment. "Of course. A woman. A date. Any preferences?" He turned, his eyes piercing hers. "Surprise me." And then he disappeared again. She stood there, her heart racing, the notebook forgotten on the counter, and a question hanging in the air. Who was Adrian Thorne's mysterious guest? And more than that, why did she care so much? The afternoon painted the sky a melancholic gold. Ilara had spent the entire day planning the dinner, sophisticated dishes infused with a homemade touch, her signature. Eggplant lasagna with goat cheese, crispy salmon with passion fruit sauce, and a light dark chocolate mousse with orange zest. Everything balanced, everything intentional. She wanted to impress, yes, but not just as a professional. She wanted to be remembered. She wore her black apron, her hair tied back in a calculated disarray. When the clock struck 7, everything in the dining room was impeccably arranged. The table was set for 2, crystal glasses shimmered, the dinnerware was snow white, and an antique chandelier cast dancing shadows on the walls. What she didn't expect was that, upon entering to make the final adjustments, there was no one there but him. Adrian Thorne was alone. "Is the other person running late?" she asked, trying to sound natural. Adrian reclined in a velvet blue chair, toyed with the stem of a wine glass. He was without his blazer, shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his gaze unreadable. "There won't be another person," he said. "Dinner was prepared just for me." "And for you?" She froze. "Me? I'm the cook. Tonight you are the guest." He rose, walked to her, and pulled out the chair beside him. "Will you join me?" Ilara looked around, confused. "Is this a joke?" "I'm not very good at jokes," he replied, with a half smile. "But I'm reasonable at recognizing when someone deserves more than just a good job." She hesitated. Everything in her screamed that this crossed a line, but at the same time, everything about him pulled her forward. So she sat. The first few minutes were strangely silent. Ilara tried to control her breathing, her thoughts, her glances. But Adrian was relaxed, almost light, as if he were finally at ease. "Did you know," he said, between sips, "that cooking is one of the most intimate ways to touch someone?" She gave a nervous laugh. "I hope this isn't some kind of sophisticated pickup line." "It's simply an observation," he replied, leaning closer. "You manage to touch where few dare, at instinct, at memory, at essential hunger." The warmth that bloomed from Ilara's stomach to her throat wasn't from the wine. It was him, his words, his gaze. "And what is your hunger, Adrian?" He paused. For the first time he hesitated. "The same as everyone who has lost too much. To be seen. But not by just anyone. By someone who sees what lies beneath the skin." Her breath hitched for a second. Adrian rose, walked around the table and stood behind her. His hand touched her bare shoulder, exposed by the subtle neckline of the simple dress she wore over her apron. The touch was light, but charged with electricity. "Do you see me, Ilara?" She turned her face slowly, meeting his gaze. "I'm trying," he smiled, but there was something vulnerable there, something she hadn't expected to find in the man the world saw as untouchable. "Then keep trying." His voice dropped like a warm breeze. "I don't usually repeat dinners, but this one, I want to repeat." When he moved away, Ilara felt that something had shifted between them. And though she still didn't know what it was, she knew that at dusk, at that candlelit table, a game had begun. A game where truths and desires were about to be served, one by one, and neither of them would emerge unscathed. Subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit the like button if you're enjoying this journey, and comment below with your predictions. What do you think happens next? The following night arrived draped in gray. Heavy clouds gathered over the hill, and in the distance, thunder began to rumble like a premonition. Ilara had already learned that the mansion seemed to breathe with the weather. The darker the sky, the more vivid its internal mysteries became. Her routine that night was simple. No formal dinner. Adrian had left a short note. Nothing elaborate tonight. Comfort and simplicity. A. Ilara prepared a warm broth, rustic bread, and a herbal tea she used to make on rainy days, a heritage from her grandmother. Something within her said he needed more than flavor. He needed comfort. It was almost midnight when the storm broke with full force. Lightning violently sliced through the sky, and the window panes rattled with the thunder. The mansion's lights flickered once, twice, 3 times, until they plunged into complete darkness. Blackout. Ilara was in the kitchen, alone. The generator was slow to kick in, and the sound of the intense rain against the stained glass windows made her heart beat faster. She wasn't easily scared, but this house, at this moment, felt too alive. Then, the kitchen door creaked open, and Adrian entered. No suit, no shoes, just a white shirt, damp from the rain, and a tired expression on his face. In that instant, he wasn't the ruthless millionaire. He was just a man, real and vulnerable. "Are you all right?" she asked. Running immediately. "The storm knocked out some of the breakers. I've already sent someone to check." His eyes swept over the improvised candles she'd lit. Always so prepared. "My grandmother's fault," she said with a shy smile. She always said those who cook must know how to calm the world when it decides to fall apart. Adrian walked towards her, slowly, without haste. "The world has been falling apart quite a bit in my recent years, Ilara." "Then perhaps I came at the right time," she responded, lowering her gaze. The silence that followed was dense but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that precedes something inevitable. She turned to grab a cup of tea, but as she did, a thunderclap exploded so violently that it startled her, causing the cup to drop and shatter on the floor. Shards scattered. Adrian reacted instantly, approaching and grasping her shoulders firmly but gently. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice deep yet soft. She shook her head, trembling slightly. For the cup, for the fright, for him. Her eyes slowly met his. They were incredibly close, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, the scent of rain and wood. His hands on her arms were firm, protective, intense. "Adrian," she whispered. He said nothing, only slid his fingers down to her hands and held them, as if they were made of crystal. The world seemed suspended, the storm outside, her racing heart. The darkness lit only by the flickering candle flames. And then, he rested his forehead against hers. "You disarm me," he murmured. "This shouldn't be happening. Not to me." "And why is it?" she whispered back. "Why did you walk into this house as a cook and turn into a storm inside me?" The kiss didn't come. Not yet. But what happened there was more intimate than lips touching. It was the touch of souls. And when he pulled away, his fingers slowly slipping from hers, Ilara knew something had broken. An invisible barrier had fallen. And from then on, nothing would be merely professional. The following days unfolded like a silent dance. Ilara and Adrian no longer pretended they were just employer and employee. The lingering glances in the corridors, the words exchanged amidst recipes and reports, everything was subtle, yet charged with something greater. And still, Adrian kept his distance. Sometimes, he seemed on the verge of drawing closer. At other times, he seemed to flee from himself. It was as if something was trapped within him, a secret too heavy to share. That morning, Ilara awoke earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully risen, but something was bothering her. A strange sound coming from the main corridor. A creak, a door closing. She slipped on her slippers, threw a coat over her nightgown, and quietly stepped out of her room. The sound came from the mansion's top floor, from a corridor she had never entered. As she cautiously climbed the stairs, she observed the paintings on the walls, old portraits with names and dates that told part of the Thorne lineage. Until she stopped before a dark wooden door, with floral carvings almost faded by time. It was ajar. She couldn't resist. She gently pushed it open. The room was bathed in gloom. The window, covered by heavy curtains, allowed only a sliver of light to cut through the air like a blade. The scent here was different, a soft floral perfume with a melancholic undertone of something ancient. There was a piano in the corner, draped with a white sheet. A dress hung on a rail. Photographs in silver frames on a vanity. And, on the perfectly made bed, a picture frame. Ilara approached, a shiver running down her spine. In the photo, Adrian embraced a woman with sweet eyes and a shy smile. She wore the same dress that hung on the rail. Adrian's gaze in the picture was not the man Ilara knew now. It was the look of someone whole. "What are you doing here?" The voice came like a dry thunderclap behind her. Ilara whirled around, startled. Adrian stood in the doorway, his eyes darkened by anger and something worse. Pain. I heard a noise. I thought," she tried to explain. "This room is not part of the house for you," he interrupted firmly. "No one enters here. Ever." She lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to know more about me." He approached, stopping a few feet from her. But some things should remain locked away. Ilara took a deep breath, her voice choked. "You talk so much about being seen, but you hide parts of yourself as if they were a crime. Why?" Adrian stared at her. For a moment he seemed ready to scream, but then he crumbled. Her name was Lydia. She was going to be my wife. She died 4 years ago. In this room. In her sleep. Without warning. Without illness. Without a chance to say goodbye. Ilara felt the impact like a punch to the chest. I'm so sorry." Adrian ran his hands through his hair, as if trying to contain the pain within his scalp. "Since then, no one enters here, no one touches, no one asks, because if I talk about it, she dies again, and I die with her." Ilara approached slowly, ignoring the instinct that urged distance. She took his hand. "Sometimes, what saves us isn't forgetting. It's having the courage to remember with someone by your side." Adrian looked at her as if she were something he didn't know how to handle, as if she were the very key to the door he never wanted to open. But instead of fleeing, he squeezed her hand. And as strange as it seemed, on that silent morning, inside the forbidden room, a piece of him came back to life. The night fell like a soft veil over Blackwood Manor. Outside, the sky was clear, as if the previous night's storm had washed away not only the rooftops, but something within Adrian as well. Since the incident in the forbidden room, he had changed. He was still the reserved, intense man she knew, but now there were visible cracks in his armor. And through those cracks, Ilara entered. She spent her days tending to the kitchen with the same passion as always, but now she saw something more. Adrian appeared frequently. He commented on the dishes. He observed her movements. Sometimes, he simply remained silent, as if her presence alone was enough. That night, Ilara had already finished her shift, gone up to her room, bathed, and changed into her cotton robe, when she heard a gentle knock at the door. Opening it, she saw Adrian standing in the hallway. He wore a gray linen shirt, its collar buttons open, and a bottle of wine in one hand. "May I steal a few minutes of your time?" She hesitated for a second, not because of the invitation, but because of the uncharacteristic sweetness in his voice. "You may." They descended together to the manor's conservatory, a glass and wrought iron structure at the back of the property, where plants grew freely even at night. The lighting was low, soft. The place smelled of jasmine and damp earth. There was a small table in the center with 2 glasses already prepared. "Did you plan this?" she asked, smelling. "I improvised." He filled the glasses. "But when you cook with such feeling, I've learned that improvisations can also be memorable." They sat facing each other, The first sips were in silence, as always. But this time, there was no discomfort. There was a growing intimacy. "Why are you still here?" he asked suddenly. "What do you mean? You've realized I'm not the easiest person in the world? That this house carries more silence than laughter? That I have too many scars?" "Yes, and yet I don't want to leave." Hebe observed her for long seconds, as if searching for the exact point where she was speaking the truth. "And you?" she asked. "Why do you keep me here?" Adrian leaned forward, his eyes darker than the wine in his glass. "Because you are the first piece of life that has entered this house in a very long time. And honestly, I'm afraid that if you leave, the rest of me will die completely." Ilara felt her throat close up. "What do you say to a man who bears his soul like that?" She rose slowly and moved closer to him. They were so near they could feel each other's warmth, even with the night breeze drifting through the conservatory. "Adrian." "Ilara." He raised a hand to her face. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, then her neck. The touch was light, almost reverent. "I don't know what you're doing to me," he murmured, "but I can't pretend I don't feel it anymore." And then, the kiss happened. Slow at first, a shy meeting of lips. Then, deeper, urgent, as if all the time they had spent avoiding each other now exploded in a single instant. His hands wrapped around her waist, pulling her onto his lap. She moaned softly against his mouth. The wine glasses were forgotten. The words, too. There were only the two of them. When they pulled apart for a brief second, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, breathless. "I'm not good at this, Ilara." "At what?" "At loving without destroying." She smiled, her eyes moist. "Then learn. With me." He kissed her again. And that night, without haste, without pressure, they discovered each other. It wasn't just desire. It was surrender. It was the first time Adrian Thorne had truly let anyone in. And, for the first time, Ilara felt that this powerful, solitary man was hers. The hours following that first kiss were like a warm breeze, gentle on the surface, but with something incandescent pulsing beneath. Adrian and Ilara left the conservatory hand in hand, as if any distance between them, at that moment, was simply impossible. The pre-dawn air was cool, but her skin burned. His, too. Without a word, they walked into the mansion. In the second-floor corridor, they stopped in front of her room. Ilara turned, still unsure whether to invite him in or to flee from the intensity she felt. But it was Adrian who took the next step. He pressed his fingers to her face, as if memorizing a secret map. Then, his hand slid down to her waist, pulling her closer. "May I come in?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, sending shivers down her arm. "If you don't, I think I'll explode," she said, with a nervous, sincere laugh. He smiled, an almost boyish smile, yet still charged with adult desire. When the door closed behind them, the world seemed to fade away. There was only accelerated breathing, the sound of fabric unbuttoning, the glide of fingers over skin, the heat growing between touches and kisses. Ilara's cotton nightgown slipped from her body as if it had a life of its own. Adrian's shirt was torn off with a haste that only comes when one has desired someone for a long time, even unknowingly. But there was no haste in their lovemaking. There were eyes meeting eyes. There were hands learning new paths. There was a silence filled with meaning. Adrian was firm, yet gentle, strong, yet careful. Ilara surrendered as one plunges into the unknown with faith and hunger. The bed became a sanctuary, the night a witness. Their bodies fit together with an almost startling naturalness. It wasn't just physical, although the desire was there, pulsating, overwhelming. It was something deeper, as if, for the first time, they were whole. And when the climax came, it was like a contained explosion, Overwhelming. Yes, but also serene. A moment of total surrender, where no wall remained between them. Only truth. Afterward, still embraced in the sheets, his chest rising and falling slowly beneath Alara's head. Silence reigned again, and this time, it was comfortable. Adrian kissed the top of her head. "I swore I'd never give myself to anyone like this again," he said, almost a guilty whisper. "Me too," she replied, caressing his chest with her fingertips. "But sometimes, we don't have a choice." "Yes, we do," he murmured, "and today I choose you." She smiled, closed her eyes, and fell asleep right there, in his arms. For the first time since she had entered that house, she felt at peace. But what Alara still didn't know was that, the next morning, the warmth of that night would give way to something cold, distant, because Adrian Thorne, despite having chosen love for one night, still carried the instinct to protect himself from the next day. The sun timidly crept through the window blinds, as if it knew that any brightness within would break the magic of the previous night. Alara woke slowly, still wrapped in the sheets, her skin warmed by the body that had been beside her just hours ago. The pillow next to her was still creased, with Adrian's unmistakable scent. But he wasn't there. The absence hit her like a dull punch to the chest. She sat up in bed, pulling her robe tighter, and walked barefoot to the bedroom door. The corridor was too silent. No servants, no footsteps, no voices. Only the echo of what had happened that night. On the marble counter in the hallway, something caught her eye. A folded envelope with her name handwritten on it. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Adrian. With trembling hands, Alara opened it and read, "It was a mistake. You deserve more than a broken man. Please, pretend nothing happened. The kitchen remains your space. Nothing more. A.T." She felt her stomach plummet. For a few seconds she stood there, her eyes fixed on the paper, as if she could read it differently. As if somehow there was an invisible line saying it was all a lie. That he felt. That he wanted. But there wasn't. And that was how. That morning, Alara walked down the stairs, not as the woman who had slept in the arms of the man she was falling in love with, but as the house employee. Cold, distant, silent. Adrian didn't appear all day. When she served lunch, the food remained untouched on the tray. Late in the afternoon, she heard footsteps in the library. She opened the door, silently, just enough to see Adrian standing with his back to her, before the unlit fireplace. His shoulders were tense, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He, too, was at war. But he refused to lower his weapons. Alara wanted to enter, wanted to scream, wanted to ask him not to pretend. But she held back, swallowed her pride and her pain, and closed the door. That night, as she prepared dinner, her hands were steady, her face serene. But inside, everything in her was chaos. When she delivered the tray to the main wing, she was met by the house's discreet housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor, who looked at her with kindness and sorrow. "He does this, you know," she said suddenly. "He gets close, and then he runs away." Alara's eyes widened. "I don't understand." "You do, but you're still trying to deny it." Eleanor touched her arm gently. "I've seen that look before. I've seen that fear in him, too." "And that guilt? Guilt? He believes he doesn't deserve to be happy. He thinks loving another woman is betraying the one he lost. But that's not love, child. That's a prison." The words echoed in Alara's mind for the rest of the night. She locked herself in her room, sat by the window, and watched the distant lights of the city below the hill. She wanted to flee. She wanted to leave everything behind. But she also wanted to fight. Because, deep down, she felt that Adrian Thorne was still in there. Trapped. Wounded. but alive. And she, perhaps, was the only one capable of freeing him. 2 days passed since Adrian had left the note. 2 days of silence, avoided glances, and mechanical routine. Ilara maintained her professionalism, but her heart was far from it. On the morning of the 3rd day, the mansion's routine was broken by something rare. The sound of tires on the gravel of the main entrance. Ilara peered through the kitchen window and saw an elegant black car pulling up in front of the main door. From it, a woman emerged. Tall, slender, dressed in an impeccable black trench coat, dark sunglasses, and hair pulled back in a perfect bun. Too elegant for that gray morning, and too self-assured to be just a visitor. Ilara felt her stomach churn. The woman was greeted directly by Adrian at the door. He appeared in a dark, flawless suit, his face serious, and for a few seconds, there was something between them. A silent exchange. A past that spoke louder than any spoken word. "Who is she?" one of the servants whispered softly, watching from afar. Mrs. Eleanor appeared from behind, her face grim. "Helena, his ex-fiancée." The words fell like lead on Ilara's shoulders. Later, while preparing lunch, Ilara tried to ignore the footsteps in the corridor, the muffled laughter, the clinking of glasses in the library. She didn't want to know, but it hurt, and Adrian wasn't seeking her out. Late that afternoon, as she crossed the corridor with a tray of desserts, Ilara turned a corner and stopped when she heard voices coming from the library. "Adrian, don't you see?" Helena's voice was low but urgent. "This woman isn't from your world. Look around you. You're a thorn." "And she? A cook. You're letting yourself be carried away by loneliness. Helena, enough. I know you. You've always had a weakness for saving people. But you forget that some don't want to be saved. They're just after your name. And your money." Ilara felt her face flush. She turned to leave, tears forming in her eyes. But before she took the first step, she heard Adrian's reply. Firm, laden with something new. "Helena, you're wrong. Ilara, she doesn't need me, I need her." "Silence. And if you came here expecting me to fall back into old mistakes, I'm sorry. I lost myself once. I won't do it again." That was the first time Ilara heard, explicitly, that Adrian chose her. Not impulsively, not out of loneliness, but by decision. That night, Helena left. Adrian didn't seek out Ilara immediately, but she knew. Something had changed. The next day, during breakfast, he appeared in the kitchen. Not to ask for a dish, not to supervise, but to look into her eyes. "Can you spare a minute?" Ilara dried her hands on her apron, trying to maintain her composure, even as her heart raced. "Of course." He pulled up a chair, sat down. He seemed lighter, more transparent. "I made a mistake. That note was an act of cowardice. It was fear. But fear doesn't suit you, Ilara." She didn't respond. "I'm still trying to understand everything you've awakened in me, and maybe I'll still make mistakes sometimes, but I don't want to lose you because of it. Because for the first time, I don't want to run." Ilara took a deep breath. The pain was still there, fresh, but what she saw in his eyes was real. Truth. "I'm not a whim, Adrian. I know. You are the most right thing that's happened to me in a very long time." He extended his hand. She looked for a few seconds, and then she took it. It was a new beginning, but what neither of them knew was that the woman in black hadn't left the stage. Not yet. The evening arrived with heavy clouds covering the hill's sky. Ilara, even after her conversation with Adrian, was restless. There was something in the air, a different kind of silence, as if a storm was about to break, and not just over the mansion. Around 6 o'clock, as she organized the pantry at the back of the kitchen, she heard hurried footsteps in the corridor. Mrs. Eleanor appeared at the door, pale. "Ilara, he wants to see you in the main drawing room. Now." "He who?" "Adrian." "But Eleanor hesitated. There's something you need to know. The woman in black, she's back. She's there with him. Ilara's heart pounded. She dropped what she was doing and went to the grand drawing room. When she entered, she found Helena standing before the lit fireplace, and Adrian further away, looking out the window. Helena turned as she saw Ilara enter, with an enigmatic smile. Good you've arrived. We were waiting for you. Ilara frowned. Adrian turned at the same moment and walked towards her. I needed you to hear this from me, not from others, he said seriously. Helena came to see me again today, but not to try and win me back. Helena took something from her purse, an envelope, and placed it on the table. I only came to clarify the truth about what happened to the woman he loved before me, about her death. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. Her death? She repeated. Adrian took a deep breath. What I never told you is that the accident that killed my fiancée years ago happened right after an argument. I thought I was to blame. That's why I shut myself off. That's why I built this mansion like a castle, where no one else could hurt me, or see who I really was, Helena continued. But the truth is that the argument wasn't the cause. She had already decided to leave for other reasons. Adrian was not to blame. The letter she wrote that night remained hidden for all these years, until today. Ilara walked to the table. She read the letter. The words were strong, honest, and liberating. Adrian's ex-fiancée confessed her doubts, her desire to start anew alone, her personal struggle, and made it clear that Adrian was not to blame for her death. Ilara looked at him. The man she knew behind the facade of power and silence now. Finally. Free. Why did you call me here? She asked, her voice low, full of emotion. Adrian approached slowly. He looked into her eyes with an intensity different from all other times. Because at dusk, Ilara, I had a surprise, a revelation. Everything I've been, everything I've lived, everything I've built, only made sense for one reason: to be whole when you arrived. She felt her eyes sting. He took her hands. And I'm not going to let you go, or pretend this is just some fairy tale romance, because you are real. We are. Helena quietly withdrew, without another word. She already knew. She saw in Adrian's eyes what hadn't been there in their time. True surrender. Ilara smiled. A smile tasting of freedom, of victory, of love. I also had a surprise, Adrian. She gently touched his face. I didn't believe in happy endings anymore, until now. He kissed her, a deep kiss, full of relief and certainty. That night, it wasn't just a revelation. It was their rebirth. The sky dawned clear the next day, as if even it had sensed the change. The weight of the past no longer hung over Blackwood Manor. The corridors seemed more alive. Light entered more freely through the windows, and Ilara felt, for the first time, part of that place. Not as an employee, but as someone who belonged there. Adrian spent the day out. He only said he was taking care of important matters. Ilara tried not to worry, but Mrs. Eleanor watched with a mysterious smile, like someone keeping a sweet secret. You have a dress put away, don't you, dear? The housekeeper asked in the middle of the afternoon. I do. Why? Wear it. He asked that you be ready by 7, in the back garden. Ilara frowned but obeyed. At 7 o'clock sharp, she stepped out the side door of the mansion. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in golden and orange hues. She followed a trail of hanging lights that led to the heart of the garden, now transformed into a small, secret paradise. There were candles lit on the grass, rose petals scattered, a low table with glasses, and in the background, a string quartet playing softly. In the center, Adrian, standing, waiting for her. He wore an elegant suit, but his eyes were what shone brightest. You came, he said, as if he still doubted his own fortune. How could I not? Adrian approached, gently taking her hands. I thought I'd never love again. I thought my life was an eternal reflection of my mistakes. But then you arrived, and you showed me that love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be true. Ilara felt her eyes well up. Adrian, he knelt. There, on the lawn, illuminated by the last light of day. Ilara, I'm not asking you to live here, or to change your whole life for me. I'm asking you to share your life with me, as a partner, as a woman, as everything. He opened the small box. Inside, a simple, yet incredibly elegant ring. Classic. Like her. Will you marry me? Ilara covered her mouth with her hand, surprised, but not by the proposal. Rather, by the way he saw her. How he chose her. Again. Right there. Before everything. Yes, of course, yes. He placed the ring on her finger and rose to kiss her, with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity of his feelings. The quartet played louder. The lights seemed to dance. That night there was no party, no fanfare. Only the two of them. And love. Finally at peace. 2 days after the proposal, Ilara was walking through the back of the mansion when she found Ms. Eleanor sitting in the old conservatory, surrounded by old boxes. "Doing some cleaning?" she asked, smiling. The housekeeper responded with a knowing look, looking for something old, or perhaps preparing the ground for a new story to begin. Ilara approached, curious. Eleanor handed her a wooden box, fastened with a worn bronze latch. "Adrian kept this for years, but yesterday he asked me to give it to you. He said it was time." Ilara opened the box. Inside, she found old photos, letters, documents, and a notebook with the Thorne family crest on the cover. She flipped through until she found a highlighted page with familiar handwriting. "If one day I have the chance to start over, I want it to be beside someone who doesn't bow before my surname, but who sees beyond it. I want that person to see who I am, and not what I've inherited." Beside the letter, there was something even more surprising. An unsigned contract. In it, the registration of a charitable foundation in the name of Ilara O'Connell, with a blank date. Ilara's hand went to her mouth. Adrian appeared at the conservatory door with a discreet smile. "This was long before I even met you, but I dreamed of someone like you. Someone who would be my partner. Not just in love, but in life. I just didn't know she existed." Ilara shook her head, emotional. You thought of this before everything. Since I lost Lydia. Since I realized that wealth without purpose is just vanity." He approached, took her hand. "This foundation will be yours. Our first project together. Food, education, shelter. We will give back to the world what life has given us now." "Do you really think I can do it?" she began, tears in her eyes. "I'm certain," he smiled. "Because you are the woman who changed my life, without needing anything more than to be yourself." Months later, the Thorne O'Connell Foundation was inaugurated with a simple and lively celebration. Children, cooks, teachers, and old residents from the region were there. Simple people, like Ilara. People who carried dreams in their eyes. Adrian and Ilara married in an intimate ceremony, in the garden where everything had begun. And that same night, under the stars that seemed to smile, Ilara whispered in Adrian's ear, "Do you know what the real surprise was at dusk?" "What?" "That the woman who thought she would only serve dishes ended up serving a purpose." He embraced her, and the man who only knew walls learned the value of opening doors. There, in the heart of the old mansion, 2 different worlds had united. Not by chance, but by love. The end. And so ends another emotional story. If you enjoyed it, please comment below and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. A kiss from our hearts to yours, and until next time.